Hello, YouTube. This is Ben Gessel. Um, I'm going to make hopefully a few different videos today. Um, we're now in the about video 16 or so. I think it's about September 25th or so, 2016. I wanted to talk a little bit today about the media. Well, I do a lot of videos about that subject, and it's a general subject, but more especially focusing on my own perceptions of the media as a whole, and in particular the Disney company. But I'll get to that here in just a bit. So, like many other folks out there, many other Americans, and just people in general in the world, I think a lot of boys, in particular, really like superheroes and things especially when we were younger, even when we were older, sure in a way, but especially when we were little. I certainly loved He-Man and Superman, just like many other boys, and so I watched He-Man a lot when I was first, second, third grade. That arena, especially kindergarten. Well, I think it was more first, second, third grade, fourth grade a little bit. Yeah, but those first few grades especially. And I had a bunch of He-Man figures, and I had some friends that had a lot of He-Man figures, and I remember, seeing who had which figures, and it was a big part of my life when I was little. I thought a lot about He-Man. So, but then of course Superman was. The thing is, I never really got into comics. Not too much. A little bit of He-Man stuff, but not so much comics. But He-Man was a big deal, as well as Superman. Superman for the movies, He-Man for the animated TV show mainly, and the action figures and stuff. And so I really think well of both those guys, both those characters. So He-Man and Superman for me personally. I never got into Batman too much. I never really got into a little bit of GoBots, certainly a little bit of Transformers. I love Legos, of course. There's probably some other things, But for me, it was He-Man and Superman, the main two. But superheroes. And then I played a fair amount of Atari games, not too much, but I remember being very fond of Joust and Archon, which is kind of like a fantasy type of chess game, as well as there were definitely at least a handful of others I really enjoyed playing on the Atari. But a lot of our Atari games, some of them worked well, some of them not so well, and that was all a long time ago. Also, I remember watching a lot of PBS when I was little. Mr. Rogers, Sesame Street, and also, I had other TV shows here and there that I watched when I was little that were kind of fun, like the Brady Bunch, but that was, I was very little. Of course, Saturday morning cartoons, the Smurfs a little bit, Alvin and Chipmunks a little bit. That was, yeah, I have memories of that, but it was, and of course the Disney Sunday night movie, but I'll get to Disney here more in just a bit. And then I listened to a lot of music, a lot of very good music. I was reading all the time, especially when I got into 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade and on up. But I just did a lot of reading on my own, and so all the nonfiction reading, I read a bunch of stuff. all the nonfiction reading was very important. It was very influential growing up. I just read about a number of different subjects, a ton of stuff, just reading encyclopedias and things. Like, I really truly believe that the old encyclopedias, now we have the internet, but the old encyclopedias were just great before the internet was around for just looking up all kinds of things. And so that was when I was a boy. Again, so Atari video games when I was a boy, superheroes, Disney books and some movies, PBS, Saturday morning cartoons, film music, sort of thing, very brassy kinds of film music, and just nonfiction type stuff. So I don't know if you guys remember Brainwaves, or anyway, some of that stuff I really liked when I was little. Mr. Wizard, you know. I liked a lot of the things that my parents liked as well. When I became more in I was more in my teenager years, when I was a teenager, I played more PC video games, personal computer. So computer games, more like Myst a little bit. There was a game on the Prodigy. It's an old internet server, an old, but it had a game called Mad Maze I liked. I remember playing Loom a little bit, and some other, like a roller coaster game. But I loved video games when I was a teenager, but I didn't play a whole lot of them. When I did, it was awesome. It was great. But my parents were never very happy with. They didn't like video games very much. So that's whatever. It's fine. You know, I just spent a lot of time doing other things that were very good to do, very important to do. Of course, I still kept liking some programs in PBS. I listened to a lot more music when I was in my teen years. I also read a lot of National Geographic and that magazine, a lot of nonfiction, a lot of science kinds of things, a lot of humanities kinds of things, just a lot of kind of brainy kinds of things. But I also had a growing interest in fantasy literature and video games as well. But movies, video games, books, that sort of thing. Then when I got into my adult years, the interest in, I guess you could say, anything that was more frightening or supernatural grew quite a bit, but within reason. I never cared for I never liked not too much. I've never really enjoyed the bloody movies. I've seen a few of them. It was never my thing. Just not a whole lot of interest in that stuff. I understand, certainly, they're exciting, adrenaline type movies. Essentially, it's kind of like action with a twist movies, but probably sometimes more bloody. But that was never something I liked. I didn't like that kind of stuff. I did like haunted house, ghost type movies, especially if they were more mysterious rather than the terrifying ones. Sure, they're fun because it's fun getting scared most of the time. but sure, anyway, just a really just kind of a nice, eerie, mysterious movie. That always was something I found really enjoyable to watch. But it kind of that's associated with fantasy. Fantasy really always kind of touches on that whole spectrum, and so fantasy and supernatural type movies. Grimm's fairy tales will have some dark elements to it as well as very nice elements. And although a lot of people like myself, I think we tend to focus more on the good stuff. Again, I like a good scare, and I talked about phobias and things recently. So Anyway, all that stuff was a growing interest in my young adult years, and as well as fantasy adventure books. That was actually fantasy adventure books I started reading even at a fairly young age. But then I kept reading, of course. So now to get to the heart of what I'm talking about here in this video with Disney. Now, you might wonder why I'm kind of singling out Disney a little bit at this point. It's because the Walt Disney Company and Disney has had a huge, a gigantic influence over Americans in particular, but people throughout the world. It's a very it's almost, well, it's hard to overestimate the impact that Disney has had, and it's just a huge it's become a very big company. It's very hard to keep my thoughts brief on the subject. I'll do my best, or try to hit the main points. Try not to get on too many tangents. Try. Disney was a company at one point. Even, I guess, as far as I can remember, Disney was a company that was oriented around family values, the imagination, outdoors, sports, exploration and learning, curiosity, and most importantly, promoting high moral standards. By high moral standards, I mean things like honesty, chastity and virtue before marriage, respect for mom and dad, as your mom and dad were doing things that were right. Not just Judeo-Christian values, but Disney really the Disney movies and everything about Disney really reinforced essentially the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments: don't steal, don't kill, don't swear. Walt Disney himself, I think, really did adhere to those qualities as well. And that was what Disney was. Now, it can be argued, yes, there's still qualities now that are like, okay. At least that's what I know for sure. Disney used to be like that at one point. You could say if anything was made by Disney, it was going to be awesome. Really, really, especially really good for kids. Yeah. So, my opinion, it's only a shadow of the company it once was that way, regardless of how much money it makes. Of what it stands for. Pixar has really taken over the kids arena a little bit more, as well as maybe a few other companies. Disney isn't known for what it once, it's not known as much for what it used to do. It doesn't do that stuff as much anymore. And yes, I haven't had TV for quite some time. My landlord now has TV. I rent I rent a place in a big house. I like that kind of situation right now. But so I didn't have TV for a long time. I never missed it. But now I've seen what's on Disney Channel. It's been quite some time, and it is it's nothing. It's nothing. It's basically just silliness. It's dumb. It's a waste of time. And it's hard for me to imagine how anybody would like to watch that stuff, with maybe the exception of a certain number of maybe, say, younger teenage girls or girls in particular. But you kind of have to be following a TV show a lot of times to really get into it anyway. But it's just pointless. The Disney TV stinks. It's not even. It's definitely not worth the money. Now, anything that shows old Disney movies, great, but you could just buy Disney movies on your own for dirt cheap, or just watch them on YouTube. So, and cartoons on YouTube. So, yeah, Disney, your TV station stinks. It stinks. No, who watches it? there's so many other things to watch. And then TV in general is oftentimes kind of a waste of time anyway, or at least often can be. So, okay, here we go. This gets into a little bit more depth in this area, and again, this is the part I have a hard time not going on tangents on. But most of the content, or much of the content, of Disney's movies that they put out in the past had a lot to do with European fairy tales. Not just Grimm's fairy tales, but Hans Christian Andersen and sometimes other kinds of fairy tales. Or, King Arthur with the Sword and the Stone, that sort of thing. Or Robin Hood. But Disney used to really have European fantasy or fairy tales. That was a big deal for the Disney company. And so we have Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, all these kinds of movies. And that was a pretty big part of my childhood growing up, like many other people. A lot of the things I enjoyed watching, just here and there, it was Disney, because the animation was just amazing, and I loved the way they did the movies. So those fairy tales, the Disney animated, brought to life really on screen, as are all fairy tales from all over the world. The fairy tales from Europe would certainly promote the values and interests and culture of Europe in the past. So, the Grimm's fairy tales. When you read Grimm's fairy tales, you're getting, in essence, quite a bit of old German culture. Would make perfect sense. It's the German people, it's imagination. These are stories that have been passed down for quite some time, and the people hold them in a very high. They're loved. They're a big part of German culture. Grimm's fairy tales, but again, we're talking about values here, values and interests, culture of Europe in the past. Specifically with Disney's choice in what they brought to movies, animated movies. We're looking, of course, more at Northwestern Europe. So Germany, France, Low Countries, England and Scandinavia, that sort of thing. Denmark, Norway, Sweden. And some areas around there, sometimes on occasion, sometimes, offhand, maybe Russia, Italy, and Spain are touched on, but really looking at, again, Germany and Denmark and England and France and Holland, that sort of place. Those sorts of places. So Walt Disney loved Europe. He loved Northwestern Europe, as do I, as do many people. Disney himself, I believe he was Jewish and more, European Jewish. I've noticed that there are very strong connections between the Jewish culture and Jewish people and Europe, even though it's, again, that subject leads right into other things that, many people are aware of. But there are strong connections between the Jews and Christians, Europeans. The two peoples, the two cultures have so many connections. And but again, in the case of Disney, he very much loved Europe, and you see this, and so we, when I was younger, so much of my own view of Europe was shaped by Disney, even if it was romanticized or glorified a little bit, or only showed the things about Europe in the past that were more beautiful. I still was absolutely smitten. Just loved the way Europe was depicted. Um, and now, of course, I know Europe has got a lot of not so good things about it. You can always change that. But associated with some of this train of thought, though, there's a lot of people that have been accusing historic people in the past, even up to the 1950s, again, like with Disney, basically anybody before the Civil Rights era. A lot of people have been going back and looking at people and saying they're racist and things, using the term racist. It's ridiculous. People don't understand how much, and I don't understand how much, because I wasn't alive back then. Most people don't understand, and this is the only way I'm able to know this is by studying, by asking questions of my parents and grandparents and things. But most people I don't think we realize how much the world has changed. The world has changed. A lot of times, a lot of respects, not for the better. And so people accuse Disney of being racist, and George Washington and Thomas Jefferson for being racist. And you hear it, and you have to just kind of process it a little bit and just discard a lot of that stuff, because it's 90% or more of a huge percentage of people in the old and before the Civil Rights era were at least a little bit racist, if not somewhat. Did not feel very comfortable around black people. Did not feel very comfortable around people that weren't white. A huge number of people. So it's kind of ridiculous to expect that those folks back then, when some form of what we call racism was the norm back then, that we should expect them to have the same worldview that we have. We grew up in a very different environment after the Civil Rights era, after all these marches, and after all this talk, and all these talks between black leaders and other people. We've done some good things, but there are so many unanswered questions about that subject, and I don't want to get into racism, that topic, in this video so much, but I do only with regards to the Disney company. So, because that has an influence on what I'm talking about with Disney and media. So, to answer charges of racism regarding Walt Disney's views on, say, people who are not white, especially those with darker complexions, even a little darker. So we're talking about Asian, American Indian, Hispanic, Arab, black, and everybody else that isn't white. Everybody else. East Indian, whatever. The simple answer to accusations of Disney's racism is that, again, most people in Disney's time who were white, as well as pretty much most everyone else in their own right, and prior to this time, would be considered racist by today's standards. And we just know more about the values of Europeans, Turks, Arabs, East Asians from the past. More people in Eurasia, as opposed to Central Africa and the Amazon and isolated areas of Papua New Guinea, that sort of thing. We just don't know as much about. That's why National Geographic has always kind of gone into jungles. And a lot of folks are very isolated in those areas. But so we just know more about Eurasia. It's just more in our history books, and we just know more about their values. So, and about maybe the peripheral of Africa, West Africa, sure, East Africa, but not Congos as much, that sort of thing. So, we still have this dialogue about race that is not fully resolved. It's not fully resolved. It's far from being resolved, although we treat people, I think, better than we used to that are not white. I think we treat people better. I definitely know that from what I've learned and how you kind of see things in the past. But there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with most of the older European values. Most of them. or, for that matter, Disney's take on those fairy tales. Because modern views on racism aren't necessarily always right or correct. It might seem ethical, and anything that's ethical, it's probably safe to say it's probably a good thing to good rules to live by. But just because some teacher, some authority figure says something is true or correct or right, doesn't necessarily mean that it is. So, regarding, okay, now this is a little bit different here. Regarding the outdoors and other movies made by Disney in the past, so like talking about the Apple Dumpling Gang, The Parent Trap, all these other movies outside of fairy tales that Disney did. A lot of these movies had a lot of. We're talking about some really awesome, great movies, good movies. They had a lot of heart, a lot of good emotions to them, a lot of good emotion, a lot of. I mean, they're great. They're like food for the soul. These movies, Shaggy Dog, Parent Trap, all these kinds of things, and you don't quite see the same heart in movies for the most part these days. Sometimes, yeah, but mostly no. Some people make out Walt Disney to be this monster of a man. Hyper-controlling, ultra-conservative, racist, cigar-puffing, workaholic. No. It's exaggeration. Some of that's probably a little bit more true, but some of that's an exaggeration. Essentially, he was a very good man. Very, very strict with his employees, for sure. I'm not saying he was one of the best men that ever lived. I just know that I would consider him to be a good man. A good man. Someone that was definitely respectable. I definitely have an enormous respect for Disney. Enormous respect. Huge amount of respect. Absolutely. And I know that he cared very deeply about the happiness of children, about wanting them to be happy and having them be in a place, come to a place that was just amazing. And I have a lot of the same desires as Disney did. And I'll defend Walt Disney to my dying breath. He was a good man. So, again, our society has changed. Considerably so, especially because of the hippie movement. So I have loyalty to the old Disney culture company. And that loyalty, I think, has fairly deep roots. I have family, relatives from California. For one thing. Of course, I read many Disney books when I was younger. Dumbo, Alice in Wonderland. Some of these, of course, some of these stories were originally, of course, a lot of Disney stuff was originally written by other folks. And so you have a Disney version of these things. But I still enjoyed all the Disney productions, of course. Robin Hood, and Chippendale cartoons. That's Disney. A lot of times, and goofy sports movies. And, I still remember a lot of books I read that were Disney books and all the illustrations in them. And it had an impact on my psyche, a really positive impact. It's almost inestimable. It has a huge impact on me. I think for the better. So, of course, there's Bedknobs and Broomsticks. I mentioned Shaggy Dog, Sword in the Stone, Parent Trap. I could keep going. Winnie the Pooh. How many would you want me to mention? Disney himself, Walt Disney, has absolutely nothing to apologize for. Absolutely nothing. I think many of us, we want Disney to return, for the most part, to the way it once was. um, kid-oriented, family-oriented, imaginative, tapping into those desires we all have for things that are imaginative and beautiful and good and fun and bring families together, bring people together. That's just what Disney was about. And, you know, I think it's great to also include other countries and cultures and stories outside of Europe. That's awesome. I just think that there's really two trains of thought here. One of them is that the European fairy tale, in my opinion, has been kind of cheapened, modernized a little bit. And there's a lot of tangents we go on in that area. A lot of people are very critical of the old fairy tales regarding women's roles and feminism and that sort of thing. And okay, but the thing is that, again, we're talking about older European values. So although it was still a very patriarchal kind of culture, women were still treated with respect, or they should have been. Chivalry was never chauvinistic. Chivalry was all about treating women with respect and being virtuous and being polite and kind, and all these things. And that was a huge part of European culture. Huge. But yeah, the fairy tale has been cheapened. It's been changed. A lot of times, these modern takes on them. I'm not always very fond of that. I have mixed feelings about that kind of stuff. So the nature of the European fairy tale itself should not be cheapened by modern culture. And I think it's kind of, I feel embarrassed by that, really, honestly. Some say that Disney kind of, cheapened the original fairy tales to begin with. Well, the original fairy tales weren't necessarily always written for kids. Many of them were pretty intense and graphic, I know. I'm talking about Germany. Germans are no stranger to a number of different darker subjects, and so I applaud Disney for trying to make these fairy tales more accessible for kids and just trying to make them more tasteful. I think that the Grimms, in many cases, would have approved of what Disney did. You're just taking away a lot of the darker elements sometimes. Some of the more bestial, or the intensity of the murders and some of the intensity of some of the witchcraft or whatever was going on in Grimm's fairy tales, taking away some of that intensity, which is extremely understandable. Extremely. So what Disney did was fine. Maybe taking a tragedy and making it rather something that has a happy ending. We all know that's Disney. We can critique that, of course. That's a different subject, but related. But, again, I'm talking about the cheapening of fairy tales. I mean, it's definitely not high fantasy to have many frequent, just kind of guttural conversations. Vulgar-based kind of slang type conversations with a bunch of slang. It doesn't lend itself to high fantasy at all, or to what we love about European fairy tales. So this is what I'm kind of pointing the finger at with modern Disney a lot of times. Sometimes you get all kinds of things with different takes on old fairy tales, and I think some new ideas are great or interesting or funny. Others are not. I wanted to talk really quick about how Disney approaches any story that comes from areas outside of Europe. I think it's often, of course, has been very patronizing, or it's often been Europeans are apologizing in some way for treating some culture, people poorly in the past. I think that's fine to still have movies here and there address those kinds of things. I don't think that it needs to keep being hammered on. we have Dances with Wolves for one. We have Dances with Wolves. We have and we have Roots. If you were to watch Dances with Wolves, having to do with the Sioux, the American Indians, and really watch it, and you're to watch some of the Roots TV um, series about slaves, African Americans. If you really were to watch both those movies or made for TV miniseries, you would not really need to see very much else to be utterly convinced that we do need to keep Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream alive, and we do need to keep treating people who are not white more fairly and more justly and more civilly, and with more with respect. We've been doing that for some time, but we need to keep those things in mind that would prevent Europeans from mocking them, or from feeling superior to them, or from hurting them, and that sort of thing. So yeah, obviously, absolutely, but we have movies that do that already. If you see those movies, the intensity of those kinds of movies, those scenes, there's no need for Disney to keep bringing up these things. Here and there, fine, but if there's all these fairy tales, there's all these folk stories from all over the world, and that Disney could still do, but not do in some patronizing way or some we're so sorry for whatever. No. Just tell the story, make it imaginative, bring all of color in, all the and most especially tap into the values of the place, the culture that the story was from. So Mulan is a pretty good example of what you could do, say, with stories from Asia, China. But there's so many more. So yeah, Disney could do more stuff like that, but I think it has more to do with the nature of where they're going with some of these movies and stories and things. So if Disney were to make a movie like The Sword and the Stone again, I really think people would take notice if it was that good. I think people would say, "Oh wow, we're seeing a different era in Disney," because The Sword and the Stone was that good, regardless of what you think. Regardless, we're not talking about historical accuracy here. We're talking about just a good story. King Arthur, Merlin. Say what you want. There are people that know a lot about what really happened back then, but we're talking about just a good movie, a good story. If Disney were to create a movie like that again, make a movie like that again, people would take notice. They would take notice, and they would say Disney is back on track again. It's got some more of that original fire that we liked about it. The humor that we liked. It needs that spark again, because the direction it's going, it's just Disney is now associated largely with pop culture. Most of what it does now is just pop culture. It's pop. It's everything about it's pop. It's not what it once was. By pop culture, just the girls just want to have fun kind of thing. People driving around sports cars. Sure, there's still that idea that in many people's minds, if you're not blonde, you're not attractive, you're not an all-American guy or girl, something's wrong with you. Yeah, people get that about Disney still. And I think that's one of the running kind of trains of thought for Disney in general. But the thing is that really, that's not what Walt Disney wanted to. He never wanted that in his movies. He never wanted that to be part of his company's culture. What he wanted was inclusion of everyone. You see that very idea in It's a Small World. He wouldn't have made that ride if he didn't believe that we're all one big human family. Disney would have gone more the direction of Adolf Hitler if he truly believed that Disneyland was only for white people or only for blondes. So he's not racist, and Disney does need to change. And yes, we liked the old Disney better than the new Disney. I mean, Darkwing Duck, Tailspin, Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers. We don't have anything like that anymore. That was the '90s. I remember Michael. Say what you want about Michael Eisner. I remember when Michael Eisner we had the Disney Sunday Night Movie. I really thought that was a great idea. I don't know what happened to it. So Disney, I hope you're watching this. I hope you're really listening here, because we're all aware of what's going on. But we don't want to pay tons of money to go to Disneyland. Many of us will. We would rather it's a little cheaper, but what we'd rather have is we'd rather have the company that it once was. We'd rather have the values that made Disney what it once was. We love Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck. We don't like people getting drunk all the time and doing crazy things that are Disney actresses or actors. We don't like that. We don't like that at all. And so, all right, guys, take care. See you later.